welcome to Can I Just Say from Common Room Radio. I'm Elizabeth Stevens.
And I'm Daphne Olive.
More Baz Luhrmann today.
I know, this is so fun. I'm so pleased. Like, I think when we first started, we said we were going to do these 3 movies. And
we did.
I'm just so happy with it.
Yeah.
I really am.
Well, I feel like, we talked about Black Sails for 3 years. We were in like the deep, dark space. It wasn't 3 years, I guess, but it was a long time.
It was a long time.
And it was a long time. And just talking about something a little more joyful and lighthearted has been pretty great. We don't usually get that space together.
Oh, no, Liz, I'm going to take you deep into politics.
No. Romeo and Juliet is obviously not lighthearted, okay? It's a tragedy. I understand this. I just mean Baz Luhrmann versus, Black Sails. It's a little bit of a different animal is all I'm saying.
Right.
The tone of the conversation is different.
Absolutely. Yes. There's certainly a lot more music and brighter colors. So many bright colors. No tropical shirts in Black Sails, even though they were in the tropics.
You'll have to tell me, did the tropical shirts come first or did this movie come first? Because I definitely remember the mid-90s tropical shirts. Like, that's all I wore was the tropical shirts with the little, the A shirts, which back then we called wife beaters. I think we're not allowed to call them that anymore.
It's best we not call them,
It's best we not call them that, yeah. But what are they called? A shirts, I think? The little white men's tank tops?
I think the tropical shirts, because I remember those in the 80s.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Magnum PI.
Right. And that was part of our thrift shop shopping was like the things we most looked out for at thrift shops were bowling shirts, like in the mid 80s. The 70s very striped T-shirts.
Oh, of course.
Those cotton T-shirts with bold stripes from the 70s. And the tropical shirt. So that was even, or maybe late 80s, I guess, near the end of my high school that we were doing that. So so I think the tropical shirts were there first. I mean, should we just get straight into how this is so the aesthetic of the mid 90s?
It's so 90s. Yes. This is such a 90s film.
Okay, so I guess we'll start with me on how this...
Yeah, do, please.
So it was 1996 when this movie came out, and I had already fallen in love with Baz Luhrmann because of Strictly Ballroom, and which I'm pretty sure, we definitely saw that also in the theaters, because I guess it had been a really big deal when it came out. And
I didn't even think that hit American theaters.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. And
that's great.
And then this came out, and it was not just that it was a big deal. Like, I remember they were, they had a whole spread in Entertainment Weekly. And the cover, I remember the cover of Leo and Claire Danes, on the cover with the outfits. And it was just it was really tapping into so many aesthetics that were happening at the time, with the really chunky jewelry, which I, as a jeweler, used to make really chunky jewelry at the time. Silver was really inexpensive back then. So jewelry was just massive. It was so
Yeah, we were doing all those. I remember all the yin yangs and suns and onks or something.
Yes, there was a lot of religious imagery,
iconography.
Yes, what was it that you called it in Black Sails? A religious mythos goulash was what was going on in jewelry. And really thick chains. People were wearing really, really thick silver chains, and it was silver was much more fashionable than gold at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
And there was there was this whole. I mean, there was a goth aesthetic, but there was also that had really also filtered into the mainstream. So there was kind of this pseudo gothic aesthetic, and then for us,
absolutely. Remember when The Craft came out?
Yes, exactly. So there was just this whole, and I was living in DC and part of this kind of craft and artist community there, and
I have such a romantic notion of you. I think back at this. Anyway, go ahead.
So I was in my mid-20s, and my husband was actually working in a nightclub at the time. So we would, sell jewelry by day and then go clubbing at night with a nightclub that used to have one party that I went to less that was a rave because I was less interested in that. And then Saturday nights was basically the big gay party. And it was just the Capulet party just felt really like home when I saw it. I was just
my God, I was just
yep, this was what my Saturday nights looked like.
Wow, that's amazing. God, I wish I had a time travel machine. I could just go hang out with you in your 20s. That'd be amazing.
So yeah, it was just really so much fun. And yeah, we really came into this movie feeling like my group of friends. Like we came into this movie really feeling like that Baz Luhrmann
Got you.
and Catherine Martin.
And Catherine Martin. Uh-huh.
That woman is a goddess. Like this movie is just so beautiful.
It is
I mean, we'll
so
talk about
beautiful.
Moulin Rouge and how it's beautiful, but this movie is just, it's exquisite. Yeah. So it was just so much fun. We were so excited about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just felt really, really special at the time.
Yeah, 96, I was, 12 years old, so I'd have been in 6th grade. But I remember the marketing for this movie. They marketed this movie hard.
Yep.
And everybody my age, like we weren't like, some people got to see it in theaters who had like the cool parents, i.e. the irresponsible parents. That's fine. But I was not allowed to see it in theaters. It was some time before I actually saw it at somebody's house at a sleepover or whatever, like you do. But I remember everybody listened to the soundtrack. Everyone had the soundtrack and knew all of the songs, and everyone knew about Leo and Claire Danes, and just that again, that super iconic, like the poster that was for this movie was everywhere. And I remember being excited to see it. I had always liked, high romance and Shakespeare and stuff. I don't remember the first time that I watched it, though. I wish that I did. Definitely not in theaters. That would have been something else. I do know that the first time I saw it, I didn't think I was going to like it at first. In that same Baz Luhrmann way that we talk about, where it just starts so heavy-handed.
I have a lot to say about the first bit of it. Yeah.
Sure. But of course, like anybody else, once you get to the lovers meet scene, it's like, forget it. I'm in. Whatever you want to do, I'm here for it.
Yeah, they definitely did. I mean, they did the romance so well.
So well. Completely agree. And I think they really got it. It feels so age appropriate.
Right. So that's what I wanted to talk about. I would love to get into how incredibly timely this feels to me. This week we didn't watch the Zeffirelli version. Which was my first. I mean, I saw that in high school. I think a lot of people saw that in high school as part of their. And I went into it thinking that maybe I think the Zeffirelli is a better adaptation, and then I reread Romeo and Juliet, which I hadn't read possibly since college. Like I've read it many times. I wrote multiple papers on it through high school and college.
Wow.
And I don't think I've read it since then. And I started reading it. And then at some point, I think I texted you and I was like, oh no, the Baz Luhrmann is so much more the correct adaptation of this.
It is certainly a more timeless adaptation of it, I feel like, if that makes any sense at all. I mean, the Zeffirelli is barely an adaptation. It's one of those things where it's so close to the source material, and so, especially being in that, set in that time period, that it feels, I mean, I know it's a 70s movie, but it feels stale and antiquated to me in a way that I feel like the Baz Luhrmann never will.
Well, and I feel like the Shakespeare isn't either. Okay, so let me have so many thoughts about this.
Sure.
The timing, just for people listening into the future, this is exactly 2 weeks, a week and a half after the Parkland shootings happened, where 17 high schoolers died in a shooting. And there's been a lot of shootings. But what is interesting or inspiring to me about this one is that the teenagers from this school have been completely taking our government to task and politically motivated and taking over social media and organizing a march on Washington. And this is, I feel like teenagers are a big topic right now in the news, like who teenagers are and what they're capable of.
Yeah. It's an incredible generation rising up.
Right. And so this just felt really timely that we happened to be talking about this story, which everyone sees as a romance. I mean, there is a romance in this story. But when I was rereading it, all I saw was, I was reminded of the fact that the actual poetry, like the actual dialogue in the play, is like a tiny bit of romance, but a whole lot of violence and
Yes.
violent language and like really raw masculinity and raw approach to sexuality, and all of those combined together, like just sex and death in the same sentence all the time. And so I wanted to bring up most things I've seen of this, and I'm going to count also Shakespeare in Love as an adaptation of this to an extent.
Oh, sure. Uh-huh.
Really focus in on the prettiness and the romance,
Right.
and like, oh, so pretty, oh, so tragic at the end, and it's like, no,
Which
tragedy.
the prologue tells you. The prologue
Right.
there in the beginning tells you exactly what you're in for. But yes,
Right.
I agree.
But it's just like, it's so raw. Like, there are pretty moments, but really this story is very raw and very
Yes.
violent.
Yes. One of my favorite lines from the whole show is, now in these hot days is the mad blood stirring.
Exactly.
That's Romeo and Juliet.
That's Romeo and Juliet. It is not pretty. And
Even their romance is very hot-blooded. It is
Yes,
not
absolutely.
tame. It is not a force of peacefulness and bliss. It's hot-blooded too.
it is. So I wanted to, so I just feel like this is all very connected. Like this story, the Baz Luhrmann one, because of who Baz Luhrmann is, and I'm going to get into the specifics of his visual and audio language of how he does movies. I feel like that's what he's tapping into, and that's why his adaptation is better for me, because of his use of chaotic noise and silence. And I think that this must be the movie where even before I realized I had this idea about him, this must be the movie that gave me that kernel of an idea of this being a crucial part of his storytelling.
Yes. The chaos and then the rest.
Yes. And I wanted to quote a listener of ours who's also a friend of mine named Rowan Hall, who is an actress and a writer. And she left me a message saying that this was a big revelation for her, that when she was studying it with a director she was working with, he had them read the play backwards. And that was, it's not interesting.
That is an interesting concept. Okay.
And so, so basically the speech at the end also very much about violence and the repercussions to the parents of these deaths and this tragedy. And she said that was when she realized that this is a play about society,
Yes.
not
Well,
about
let's-
romance.
Yes, absolutely. It's about society, which brings me to the question, how do you feel about this adaptation not showing so much, I mean, barely showing at all, how this did bury their parents' strife, how it's supposed to have brought peace to this town? I feel like he glossed right over that.
Did gloss over that.
I mean, and in the play, for those of you who don't remember, Capulet and Montague say to one another that each is going to build like a statue or an icon
Right.
of the other's child as a tribute to the family and to show peace between the households from now on. And I feel like there was no indication that there was any peace gained by their death.
Or learning.
Or learning, yeah.
I'm okay with that because, I mean, look how old this story is. Look how long, I mean, and look how much the destructive forces that created this situation. Like, I kind of put this to two things. Like, the destructive forces that I see here are the idea of vendetta, of feuds and violence in general, and also masculinity. I mean, I think this play and especially this movie really have a lot to say about not just masculinity, but gender. And in this case, gender and how it misguides men towards violence. And I think that that's those two things are really big
Interesting.
parts of how the storytelling is done, especially in the movie. But the kernels are all there in the play of these two elements. And think about it. This play is so old. We're still dealing with this stuff. Like, again, we just had like the 20th school shooting in not even 2 months of this year. Like, this is relevant now. So to have everything get made up and the adults say, oh, we see we see that we were wrong and let's now be friends. It just doesn't feel right to me right now. I mean, this is something we can aspire to, but to have that be, the end of it in the past, it just feels like maybe just glossing things over. Like, these things are still relevant to us. Hundreds of years later, we're still making these mistakes.
Yeah. That's very interesting.
I'm not trying to be like, horrible, horrible, miserable, everything is wrong. I do think there've been progress. And again, these teenagers right now, like I am like super on a high of, oh my God, teenagers are kind of amazing. And I do think like there's a lot of criticism of teenagers that we have to get into in like Romeo especially, and his, this is a big joke in a way in the beginning of the play, like that he wants Rosaline, and then he's like, oh, so everyone's like, so Rosaline? He's like, but what, who?
I have forgotten that name, and that name's Woe.
What? So I love it. Okay, so I'm going to be the one who just like talks about it with like my own language, and you will be the person who quotes the play. This is so great.
This is such a random, like, I don't know if I can even call it a talent. It's just like a random thing that my brain does that just absorbs information and lines and can quote back poetry and stuff too. It's not always exactly correct, but the gist of it is always going to be there.
No, that's awesome. And I could do that with Black Sails, but clearly nothing else.
Yes. I will do my best.
So yes, I'm really enjoying that. But yeah, so I really like that, because a lot of people just are like, oh, teenagers, like they are impulsive and they don't stick with a thing, and all these things that people say about teenagers. And some of that stuff's true, because, developmentally people are different at different ages.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is that teenagers have not yet learned to make horrible compromises. And so teenagers will be, and this is what we're seeing right now in this moment in history in our country. Like, teenagers will call you on your shit. Teenagers will not stand for hypocrisy. And that's in my eyes, that's part of the same thing. That's like the positive side of the same tendency, the same developmental moment of just like, yeah, they don't necessarily think about all the sides, but sometimes that's good. Like, there is a good to be had in that as well. Is that if you pause and think about all the sides, you can kind of think yourself into inertia or think yourself into like inability to act. So it's like the same thing that makes a teenager maybe act too quickly to fall in love and like get married the next day is the same thing that makes a teenager like slice through all of the hypocrisy and see truth. Wow. And I think that is relevant to here, because I think that is who Romeo and Juliet represent.
Yeah.
In this story.
Sure. Yes. Especially when you see the parents, Capulet especially. Capulet is such a fascinating character to me, because he starts as the voice of reason.
Right.
When he's there at the party with Tybalt, he's telling Tybalt to cool, that it doesn't matter, that... You're laughing.
No, I'm really excited to I want to bring that up too. Okay.
Yes, he's telling Tybalt that he needs to be calmer, that he needs to keep the peace, and yet when he gets his blood up, he completely loses all of his cool with his own daughter, and his wife is calling him down. You are too hot, and he is immovable. He just is consumed by raw emotion. And I've talked several times on several of our shows about like any one emotion will set itself up as the only truth, the only true thing, and the only way to act. And you see that in Capulet too, which is just fascinating how if it's not his emotion, he can see, oh, well, you're in over your head and you just aren't seeing things clearly. But as soon as it's his, everything goes out the window, and it's just this blind rage.
I would like to take this opportunity to start working on our list that we came up with in Strictly Ballroom.
Oh, great. Okay.
So for anyone who hasn't listened to our Strictly Ballroom episode, we had a lot of fun. Hope it's fun for you too when you get to it.
We certainly do.
But what we did do is we came up with a list of themes that we suspected might be significant themes for all three of the Red Curtain triptych films.
Yes. I love that we're just saying, nope, it's not a trilogy, it's a triptych.
Not a trilogy, it is a triptych.
Yep.
That is how we have named it.
Mm-hmm.
So one of those is about subverting norms, and when people subvert norms in a performative way and when they do it for themselves, and the idea of when you are when you're actually like being your true self, and when you're being the self that is the one you're trying to present. And that all relates to stages. Because not stages like stages of life, but stage.
Actual physical stages. An actual as part stage. Of the set piece. Yes.
Right. So when are people performing and when are they being true? And for me, the part of when Capulet is telling Tybalt not to fight Romeo, that is significant is not that he's being so calm to himself, but he's saying, this is my party. You can't make this trouble amongst my guests.
Oh.
Because this party was Capulet basically showing his grandeur to the culture at large, and, arranging this marriage with Paris.
That's a really good point.
So this wasn't necessarily about whether, obviously Capulet is, again, this feud is from the parents, and we don't know how many generations back, but both of these fathers have chosen, and the mothers, have chosen to continue this feud. Mm-hmm. But Capulet saying, not now, because you're going to mess up the staging of my performative thing that I'm doing right now.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I like that very much.
Okay, so let's. I really want to talk about all these topics because I found them to be so interesting here, and I don't know which one to start with. But maybe let's start with the opening scene, because I remember you even said during Strictly Ballroom that, and you said it again now, that was such a difficult introduction for you.
Yes, absolutely. Although now I love the cityscape that they give us.
Yes,
that very Southern California, LA.
It's I think that they said it's like Brazil and Miami was the inspiration.
Oh, I definitely saw Brazil.
Right.
Definitely.
Right. No, but it's and it was actually filmed part of it in Mexico.
Okay. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. I didn't think of Miami. I definitely thought of California, maybe just because it's Verona Beach and that made me think of California more. That might have been all. Yeah.
It's all of those. That's an interesting discussion that I don't feel like I am equipped to do, which is a different discussion about all of those places being places where Latin American culture, again, Brazil and Mexico, not same, obviously, but places where North American and Latin American culture collide, and they definitely are using that. And I don't feel equipped to have that conversation, sadly, of how I feel about that, and where I think that Baz Luhrmann used it well and not well as an Australian. So also as a person who's not even remotely
not even close.
So yeah, it's very possible that he really just used that as cultural references which maybe is less cool and kind of ties into what he was doing with Spanish immigrants in Strictly Ballroom. I don't know.
Yeah. No, the one place where it missed with me is just how very white Claire Danes is. So, and I get that the mother is also clearly very white and a blonde woman even, but Claire Danes is so good. She's so good.
Yes.
But it would have been lovely to have...
Right, to have a Latina.
To have a Latina actress.
Yeah.
It really would have been.
Yeah. It's, I think, I'm not trying to gloss over the question of culture and representation. I don't feel like that is a place where either of us has enough knowledge to really address it.
Right.
And, I'd like to think that it wasn't just surfacey, but it might have been. What I wanted to talk about, again, this, with that opening bit was that especially after reading it again, was that my impression of when you see the Montague boys, as they're called, in their car and all of that with their shirts, is that this was performative masculinity. That they were,
definitely
compare them to what you want, to frat boys, to whatever, that kind of thing, where they're egging each other on towards just this really, again, I'm trying to think of other words, but performative version of masculinity.
Toxic masculinity that we talk about
exactly
in society. Yes. Mm-hmm.
That led them, even though they were terrified, that actually led to violence.
That's right. So, and I love how you showed that, or how he showed it rather, that boyish fear that came up, but that feeling that because, and that power in the pack too.
Right.
He said, here comes one of my kinsmen, do say I.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that whole thing just really so that was the noise, right? So we had all this noise, back to this thing that I'm now, I guess, completely obsessed with Baz Luhrmann, about the noise and then the quiet. So we have that scene where it just startles you with the amount of visual noise and sound and just color and just so talking really fast and just all of that. And then the contrast is then when you see Romeo, and you have one of those quiet moments.
Very quiet moment. Mm-hmm.
And he's doing poetry, and he is on the stage. Like that's when I brought this up. Like the stage
he sure
in this
is,
film,
yeah.
right? So we have to look at this stage, and I have a theory now of what I think this stage represents. But
That
so we have that
whole
stage on the
beach
beach. Incredible, right?
is such an incredible piece of set making. Incredible.
So we see him on that stage, but he walks away. So that's like we see him walking away from the stage. Okay, I guess I have to say, like, for me, I've decided that the stage is where the Montagues, or all of them, I guess, when they're there, perform masculinity. Like that's where they do their machismo. And so there's all these moments throughout where exactly when they're on the stage is when they are most riled up themselves and rile each other up. And you see this over and over again. So the first time you see the stage is when Romeo is walking away from it because he's quiet. And this already set apart Romeo and Juliet from the culture. Like, so the culture is one where the parents have passed down to the children this feud. So they have warring factions and this love of guns and this need to perform dominance. So it's not just violent dominance, but so that's where the Capulet thing with the party is related to. Like this constant one-upmanship in whatever form it takes. And so that's when we see noisy moments in the movie, that's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
And when we see the stage, that's what we're seeing for the younger men. It's like that's when they're showing that they can perform these roles that they've been handed by their society and by their elders. And the quiet moments are always Romeo and Juliet's. So this is setting these two people aside as two people who are trying to change it, who are trying to find another way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and who are really being their true selves. Like you don't see that same masking that you see in the other people. Yeah, who are trying to fill roles, I think, more than be people and be themselves.
Exactly. So maybe before we go back, I'm going to take us hopefully back to the quiet and loud and the stage and masculinity and, all of the topics. But let's maybe talk about Romeo and Juliet and who they are to each other. Like, because that was one of our themes, was like how in Strictly Ballroom, we talked about how they kind of inspire each other. And do you feel like Romeo and Juliet is the same kind of couple?
Oh, it's so hard to say because we don't get we don't get any real character arc with either of them in the way that we got with Scott and Fran. Like we get their falling in love, but everything...
No, you're right.
That we get.
Maybe they're more of a symbol than anything else. Like, so let's maybe just talk about who they are in contrast, like what I started, like who they are in contrast to everyone else.
I think so. What I was ruminating on a bit as you were talking about this idea of the stage and the performativeness and we talked about the roles that these other people have in these families, is that they are the actual son and daughter of the people at the height of this empire, right?
Yes.
So, and I think that gives them in some sense almost more individual freedom because they don't have to earn their place in these families. They don't have to earn their spot and show their loyalty in the same way because they're the son and daughter.
That's so true. Right. They are already basically the two heirs in a way.
Exactly. Yeah. So they don't have to prove themselves, which gives them, in a sense, freedom for that kind of individuality that they have. But it also, that's one of Juliet's first lines, when the first part of her big balcony speech is what's in a name.
Right.
And telling him to doff his name. And he says, absolutely, I will, call me but love, and I'll be new baptized.
Huh. That's so interesting. Yeah, so that's an interesting question because I had very much focused on it as who they are because of the way Baz Luhrmann is framing, basically everyone else's noise. Everyone else is showing us noise and chaos and all of that and weird camera angles and all of his tricks. And the first time we see each of them, it is in quiet contemplation.
Yes.
Like Romeo, also, but also Juliet, when you see her. And this was an interesting thing about water. I still haven't quite unpacked. Like, I haven't
I
unlocked
know.
the secret of water
I
here.
don't know what it is, but they're doing something. Yes.
Right. He's definitely doing something. So like and I love that the first time we see Juliet is when she's in the bath with her face in the water.
Is
Right,
there
so
something about like that water and fire, like the firepower and the water, like masculine, feminine, that kind of like deep ancient archetype, you don't think?
Don't think so, because water's also death. Like, water's also like, because Tybalt falls into water when he dies, and like the connection I was able to make. So like let's talk about this. Maybe we can figure it out. Like the connection the connection I made, which I found kind of fascinating, was that we have this view from under the water. Like, our first view of Juliet is her face in the water, submerged. That's not our first view of Romeo, although what they do share is the quiet contemplation.
Yes. And he is there by the beach. Do we see the waves? I know we see the sunset.
Maybe,
we know
but
he's on a beach.
Right. There's a lot of water. I think,
Yeah.
No, I think it's about being in water, because the thing that was striking to me is right before they see each other, you have the exact same image of him after he's taken the drugs.
Oh, that's right. And he puts his face in the sink.
And that's when he loses his mask.
Oh, and the mask falls off. That's very good, Daphne. Yeah.
And that's when they both see each other through the aquarium.
Uh-huh.
And
Oh,
that's
that's
when
very
they
good.
notice each other. That's when they make this connection through the aquarium. And I love, the aquarium's beautiful, like obviously beautiful,
is so
super beautiful.
Beautiful. That
Yes.
scene does not need to be that pretty.
I know.
The music, one of my favorite pieces of music,
Yep.
just gorgeous. Oh my
Yes.
God. Yeah.
But what's also,
Unnecessarily beautiful scene.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm struck by it every single time. What is interesting to me, having noticed this connection with the faces in the water, was that that when they're looking at each other, and I was always fascinated this visually, like when they're looking at each other through the aquarium, you see the other face larger than it should be, and it seems
Yes.
really close. And only after you've kind of looked from both perspectives do you see how wide that expanse of water is. And I've always loved those kind of visual tricks that water plays.
Yes.
But I just felt like it was such a great choice that perhaps the thing that connected them was choosing. It's not just quiet. It's almost like shutting out the noise by being underwater. It's like a deliberate shutting out of the noise. In both
Sure.
cases.
Yes.
Like, they're
yes.
screaming for Juliet to prepare for this party, and she's choosing to not hear them.
To submerge herself under the water. Yeah.
And Romeo needs a break from those drugs, because it's cool and all, but I can't imagine.
Right.
Like,
that
you
party
imagine
was enough on its own,
Right.
let alone on drugs.
Yeah. Also, that is the mid-90s.
Indeed. Too young for that part. Thank you.
But yeah, I just that's what bound them together for me, was that they were people who would choose to shut out the noise and shut out, again, the violence and the performative thing, and be inside themselves. And that is something that we talked about a lot in Strictly Ballroom as well, like the performative nature of some of the characters who only live for like how other people see them, and the nature and the characters who inhabit their own selves, or learn to inhabit their own selves.
Yes.
And all of that. So I for me, that was what was so cool in this moment of recognition, was that it happened right after Romeo did what Juliet had done. And we
Wow.
had seen him a bunch of times, and he always was trying to resist the stage. He was on the stage with his friends, but he was trying to resist the whole time what they were doing. And we really need to talk about Mercutio soon. But
Yes, no, I know. Well, I was just thinking too that, I mean, obviously, then when we get their declarations of love for each other, it is in the water
it is
together.
in the water, and they both are underwater quite a bit during that. Again,
Yeah, surprisingly so, which now is making more sense now that we're kind of unpicking it a little bit. I remember even at the time thinking kissing underwater is not good or fun. Like that's
No. It's
Yeah.
they love to do that in movies. Boy, do they
yes,
love to
but
do that in
it's-
movies.
In
but-
real life, no.
Right. No, but again, okay, so maybe Tybalt dying and falling into the water is significant. Like, maybe the water is not about necessarily masculinity and femininity, but it's about quiet and noise. That basically Tybalt is the extreme of all of that. Again, not unrelated to masculinity and stuff, but that the thing that actually is the moment where Tybalt ends up being quieted is when he's in the water, and that's when Romeo has embraced the violence. It's the only moment. That was the moment where Romeo embraces vendetta, embraces violence, embraces vengeance.
And to me, that is my favorite of Leonardo DiCaprio's performance in the movie.
Yeah.
A lot of him as Romeo doesn't work for me very well. His grasp of the language isn't very good. Claire Danes is able to use the language a lot better than I think that Leonardo DiCaprio is. Again, they're both kids, so there's a lot of, grace for that. Shakespeare's super hard. But when he first came on screen, I was not thrilled with Leo just at first. But the more he leaned into that raw emotion, the more he does. Really worked for me.
Yeah. That has always
By the end
been
of the
his
movie,
strength.
I just love him. It's true. Yeah. I think for that reason, I would not change the casting. It just took me longer to like him as much as I liked Claire Danes just from the get-go, from the jump.
She is a queen of subtlety in performance. She really is.
And anyone who can make Shakespeare subtle, wow. Hats off to you, gal. Wow.
Especially in this movie.
Yeah. But she becomes like one of those quiet moments. Yes.
Right. That is her role.
That Baz Luhrmann quiet moment.
Right. And she is the only character that retains it. I mean, that for me was one of the quiet and noise juxtapositions that actually is the most affecting for me, because you exactly have her waiting for him and like talking about like dreaming about him and how the vision of him's going to change the world, exactly at the moment that you get that close-up of him like driving and so fierce. And he really did. He had managed to not be part of the culture, not be part of the culture of violence and masculinity up until that moment. And I feel like the interesting choice that Baz Luhrmann made was that to make Tybalt actually be running away. Like, I don't think that's in the play. Like, it felt like in the play, the battle happened between Tybalt and Mercutio, and then Romeo immediately fights Tybalt. Whereas in the movie, you actually have Tybalt run away. So it's actually worse what Romeo does. Like, he's not just, in the heat of the moment. I mean, it is still heat of the moment, but it's not the same as if in the heat of the moment, he picked up a sword and started fighting. It's that Tybalt ran away. He actually chose to go after him. Yeah. And Tybalt is disarmed when he kills him. Tybalt's on those stairs. Again, Tybalt totally would have been willing to kill an unarmed man. Yeah. But in the heat of the moment, again, during when they're trying to do the duel, and he does. Like, Romeo's like, here, take my gun, and Tybalt has been like beating on him when he refuses to duel.
Absolutely.
But in the moment when Romeo shoots him, he is disarmed. He is backing away from Romeo, and then he falls in the water. So that actually kind of works, as the water still being the place of quiet, the place where you are separated from this violent world.
The cessation of the violence, sure.
That's really interesting. Okay. But then we do have the one other, so maybe it needs to just be pools of water, because then we have the moment where Mercutio. Let's talk about Mercutio. I can't believe I've risked it this long. Where he is standing in the water and shooting into the water.
That's right.
Like, kind of weird, but let's talk about Mercutio from the beginning.
Okay.
Let's talk about. Okay, can we just like have a moment to just talk about how we didn't do the Tybalt minute? Like, I've managed to not just freak out about how much I love all of these actors.
No, do it. Go ahead.
No, let's talk about Mercutio now. I will freak out about John Leguizamo, or I just did. John Leguizamo as Tybalt is my favorite thing. Mercutio is still my favorite character, but it's really hard for me. And I did a poll on Twitter, and everyone chose Mercutio. Yeah. We got one Juliet and one Tybalt, and 23 Mercutios, and that's
hysterical.
Not surprising to me. But yes, John Leguizamo as Tybalt is glorious. I love it so much.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
But
such presence.
But okay, and I don't know if I know how to pronounce his name.
God, yeah, I don't even know.
Let me find Harold Perrineau. I hope I pronounced that correctly. who I loved before this because he was in Oz. So I already loved him coming into this.
Oh, okay.
He's
Do not
he's like
remember Oz,
the
but okay.
narrator character in Oz. He's in a wheelchair and he's fantastic.
Okay.
So I already loved him coming into this, but I'm pretty sure that Oz was. Ooh, now I'm suddenly wondering which came first. Okay, I just loved him in the mid-90s.
Sure.
Whichever came first. He's so fantastic. And it's like Mercutio's such an amazing character. And I know that last time we said that, I still want Toby Schmitz to be Mercutio, but not instead of him, because his Mercutio,
of course,
is so fantastic. And I'm just really curious where he fits in all this. Like, he is an interesting person in this story because he's not of either house.
He's a complete wild card. Yeah, he's a
what?
free agent. Yeah,
he is a free agent. I mean, he's tied to Romeo, and I feel like Baz Luhrmann made him be kind of in love with Romeo, and possibly not know it himself. Mm-hmm. It's not clear. That. Yeah, right. It does feel like that. Like, it definitely feels like I feel like in the play, I've always felt like Mercutio's like one of those kind of forever bachelors who like loves to talk about sex with women but kind of hates women at the same time.
Yes.
He's that guy, like the playboy, who I don't know what we're going to call him, like the guy who would have never married.
Sure. Yeah, I know I know what you mean, though.
Yeah,
yes.
I don't know what to call that person, but here I think that they have chosen to make him be gay or interested in Romeo, like perhaps bisexual, not really clear. We haven't gone into it, but that definitely having romantic feelings towards Romeo. And it was really interesting to me that the moment, like that whole interchange when the nurse comes to the beach, and Mercutio in the play, I think even has more like horribleness towards her. Like he's really harassing her.
Insufferable and harassing her in the play.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I feel like here it was about jealousy. That he want, because it was like Romeo walking away from him. Yeah, absolutely. And about Romeo actually possibly being in love.
But you're right, the way that he jested about Rosaline in this film, especially in the adaptation, did spark of jealousy. It absolutely did.
Right. And it's so interesting. And that was also an interesting moment for me because I kept thinking about this kind of performative masculinity and Romeo not choosing to be a part of it, was when the nurse comes and Romeo's walking away, they're all being really bawdy. It's almost like they're like, no, don't go down that road. Like that his embracing being like romance, his embracing romance was different than the way the rest of the story looks at sex and marriage.
Yeah.
The rest of the story is really about sex as a physical thing, sex as, as something about lust action, and lewdness and all of this. And that Romeo is like his biggest way of turning his back on that kind of masculinity is to love deeply and write poetry about it and have that be actually the most important thing to him.
Mm-hmm. I like that very much.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We have not talked enough about Mercutio, but he's just fun. I'm not really sure. Like, there's other stuff to talk about there.
There's really not a lot there for Mercutio on the page other than him just being dynamite. Like, he's just so compelling. He's so much fun as a character, and he is kind of like stealing the show just because he's so watchable, which is weird to say when you're reading it, but it's that same kind of idea.
No, but you feel it when you're reading it. You're
right.
Aware.
You really do. Yeah. No, he's such a compelling character that it's said that that's why he dies in the third act or whatever it is, because he's running away with the play. Like, I can't have this guy here. Nobody's going to care about Romeo.
Yeah, no, I loved it. He's so interesting. I want to understand him better. Like, the Queen Mab speech is fascinating. Like, is Mercutio a little out of touch with reality? Is he like... is he kind of related to the fairy world? I found it really interesting that's very interesting. Mm-hmm. That Romeo is who grounds him. Like, their relationship is fascinating. I always end up wishing I had more of.
I love to
more
see
time
all
with the two of them.
Friendly moments together.
Right.
I think I love their friendship and how I do think that Mercutio really values Romeo, even if you don't say that he's in love with him. Like, the character of Mercutio values Romeo very much. Yes, as that little bit of peace in all of the chaos. And he doesn't seem, even though he teases him about Rosalind, he doesn't seem to actually want to change him in the same way that, say, Benvolio seems to.
Right. Benvolio's old, like, let me show you lots of ladies.
Yeah, exactly. I really, really like this interpretation of Benvolio a lot. Benvolio works for me here very much. I like that actor in the role. He seems so comfortable and natural, and he does not seem to be questioning his place in the scheme of things in the way that other characters seem to do. It's very interesting.
That is interesting. I mean, I feel like, do you see him as a little bit of a bridge as well? Like, because there is in the opening scene, like he is trying to actually stop the fight before he
absolutely
totally jumps in. So he's a bit of
But
a
I guess that's what I mean, is
peacemaker.
that he doesn't seem to be as, like the other guys, the Montague boys, he doesn't seem to be as much as performative. Like he seems to actually be comfortable in his skin is the best I can say. Like he knows who he is and where he stands in the scheme of things, I think.
Well, this might go back to your idea that Romeo and Juliet have the freedom to be different because they're the heirs. He's a cousin. Like he's not, like they talk about their masters. He's actually of the family. Like, because I'm going to assume like the other guys are like the gang,
Right.
but not
Absolutely.
but not necessarily of the family. So maybe, because Benvolio, he's in the limousine with the parents.
Right.
Like, so
absolutely, which is a very, a higher standard. It makes me think again of that mobster mentality too. There's a lot of the mob family in this particular adaptation. Yes.
Absolutely. Again, back to vendettas. Like we covered this in The Godfather, that this idea of vendettas, having to wipe out whole families, to keep, Wow. It's all, well, and again, this is not to say this is only Italians. This is lots of cultures, but this is actually set in Italy. And it is, Shakespeare sets a lot of things in Italy and is certainly playing on the stereotypes his audience would have about hot-headed Mediterranean types.
Of course. I didn't even think of that. Good point.
Yeah. No, Shakespeare loves to play that card.
Yeah, of course. God,
Again,
think of that.
I mean, I think probably for Shakespeare, that was his version of like what our storytelling culture will do with superheroes. It's like if you take this outside of our context that we know intimately, you can heighten all of the stuff. Like what you and I always talk about in storytelling is that in the space of it not being real, you can go to emotional extremes that are very satisfying for the viewer, because they can kind of experience those extremes in a safe space. And so for England in the 1600s, like Italy would be that, like that was like, it's like other European countries would be that for them. They hadn't made up Superman.
Right.
Yet.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Wow. I like that very much.
Okay, so can we go through? I want to go through the stage a little bit, like the different parts. I love this stage. I think I've already said that.
It's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous.
This whole set piece of that beach is just the seediness, but still like the glamour showing through.
Yep.
That kind. Oh God, it's stunning.
Also totally a 90s aesthetic. Like the glamorous seediness.
Yep, absolutely. Wow.
Yes, that is so a 90s aesthetic. It's always fun for me to go visit it again.
Sure.
But I think it's really interesting. So we talked about the stage, a few of the stage parts. I think it's really interesting that we had Romeo walking away from it at the beginning, and then we had the part before the story where they're all riling each other up, and Romeo's like, I don't really want part of this. But then he chooses to go with fate. Like he talks about fate, and that's when he decides to take the drugs.
Oh, interesting. Sure.
So that was maybe that was the first moment of him buying in. I mean, maybe this was interesting. Although that is what leads him to love. That's a hard one. So
It is hard. Well, I feel like he was trying to escape the bad feelings of love for a little while. Like that's what everybody was telling him to do. He kept on saying, "You have, light wings or whatever, dancer's heels, but I'm heavy-hearted," etc. On and on. And so I think he was just trying to feel something else because he was emotionally overwhelmed with this despairing, unrequited love of Rosaline.
Yeah, well, which is definitely what drugs do, or one of the things they do.
That's it. Yep. And I like that was too much, though. That was another too much. Like, this is not a real escape. This is just augmented reality, which is not what I want. And then he gets the real escape, which is like all the good, happy feelings of love by someone who loves you back.
Right. Exactly. So the next part on the stage is when the nurse comes. So that's what I had said before, that he was choosing romance over these displays of masculinity that everyone else seems to be enjoying so much.
Yeah.
And then the next part is the fight between Tybalt and Mercutio.
Yes.
And each person at some point, like this, like the standoff in the beginning, they each had moments where they were more, kind of more into it and less into it. Like they were definitely kind of feeding off of each other when the tension is heightening. What did I want to say about the stage part? Oh, okay. So we have an interesting thing with noise and quiet is that before Romeo arrives, we do have them riling each other up, and that like circling, which is really dizzy making. Like I just felt very overwhelmed by that. I do every time. And then Romeo arrives and like all the noise stops. And then Romeo's talking to Tybalt in a much quieter way about, saying the love I bear thee is...
Whose name I cherish more tenderly than mine own. Yes.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
So that's the quiet moment then that again brings us outside of this, masculine standoffish. Not standoffish, standoff, not standoffishness. That's something very different.
Totally different.
Totally
Opposite
different.
of that.
But so then the moments, like it's like each part, they end up on the stage. So when Tybalt is beating Romeo up because Romeo won't fight him, that is framed by the stage. And then when Tybalt when he wounds Mercutio gets up on the stage to do his speech about it's just a scratch, and
yes,
I'll be a grave man tomorrow and all of that. That happens on the stage also, which is a bit of bravado.
Absolutely.
And then when you see Mercutio die on the beach, so then he leaves the stage to die, and you actually see Tybalt understanding what he's done, like the weight of what he's done, and he's on the stage.
Oh, fascinating. I didn't realize that.
And then when he leaves, you actually get a view through the stage to the beach, and all you see is Mercutio's body. Wow. So, and that's the last time we see the stage. So it was like, I feel like we kind of cycled through this whole thing of like, this is where we do our masculine act.
Yes.
These are the repercussions. And now we're moving on. And then we move on to the whole thing of the quiet and the noise and Romeo making the choice to go for vengeance. The thing that was interesting to me about that, I said before that I felt like in the play it was more of a fight. Here, I feel like what he's done by making it a pursuit, or what Baz Luhrmann has done by making it a pursuit, is really giving Romeo, I feel like, more agency than he had in the play. He is actually their downfall. Like the parents are everything as society is their downfall, but in that moment, he is actually their downfall. Like they could have probably figured out a way to deal with this whole feud, but it's killing Tybalt that actually separates them and leads to, this series of misunderstandings.
I love Juliet's speech. They cut the scene where the nurse returns and says that Tybalt is dead. And I don't remember the series of events where she's so confused at first. First she thinks Romeo's dead, then she thinks Tybalt is dead, and like she's just trying to catch up.
She and the nurse have communication issues sometimes.
They do anyway, yes. But I love how, she gets so upset when she hears that Romeo killed Tybalt. And then the nurse says something about, yes, what an evil, vile, whatever. And Juliet chides her. Juliet says, what does she say? Something like "cursed be your tongue" or something like how dare you say that about the man I'm in love with, basically. And
With my lord, like the man she's already married to.
yes, and married to my husband, and yes, what tongue will smooth my husband's name now that I, your 3 hours wife, has mangled it or whatever.
Right,
it is,
that part
which
is in
just
the film.
gorgeous.
Yeah,
right. She says that, but it's just like this inner monologue, which is it's beautiful. It's beautifully done, but I love seeing it happen right there in real time, I guess, when she's processing everything is a gorgeous scene.
Well, part of her processing, though, which they kept this bit in whatever, Father Lawrence, he's Father Lawrence here, right? Not Friar. They kept,
that's right.
They kept it in his mouth, but part of her thinking there is, you know, how can I hate him when my cousin wanted to kill him? Like, and that's what I'm saying, is that they basically took that element to some extent out of the story because Romeo was pursuing Tybalt. I mean, yes, Tybalt did try, grab the gun. I mean, it was, but he's, at that point, Tybalt was fighting for his own life. Like, they actually flipped it in a way, I feel like. So to say, like, how can I blame Romeo when he was
Mercutio's death was an accident.
Right.
And Romeo's fault. In the play, it's very clear, and the words are clear too. Like and Mercutio says, "I was hurt under your arm." Right,
exactly.
Like if you hadn't, why did you come between us? If you just let this go.
So, but in the movie, she can't really argue that the only reason that Romeo killed Tybalt is because Tybalt would have killed Romeo.
Yeah.
So they kind of had to take that out because it's not true. Like Romeo got in a car and pursued him. Romeo shot him when he was unarmed.
Well, the lines, I think, are the nurse says, "Do you speak well of him that killed your cousin?" And she said, "Should I speak ill of him that is my husband?"
That part still works. Works. But the saying that he had to kill Tybalt because Tybalt wanted to kill him doesn't work anymore.
Nope. Wow.
Right? So they did. That's what I'm saying. I feel like they gave Romeo a little bit more agency, which works really well for me because I really do believe that Baz Luhrmann is really making this about society at large. Again, that's part of the play, but I think that Baz Luhrmann's really making it be about that.
Yeah.
And so that was the moment where Romeo lost his strength to stay away from that.
Right. And it's such a powerful scene where he grabs the guard or whatever it is, whoever's locking up. I don't even think it's a guard because it's the church, right? So whoever's locking it up, but he grabs the person, takes a hostage. Yeah. And at that point, he has completely lost himself.
Right. And he says that. And it's interesting because that's what he
says.
That's right.
The words
there are the words
to desperate man.
Right. Which is what he says to Paris in the play. You had asked me about that, what I think about that, about Paris being taken out of that. And I think it's right. Because I do think that for the way they played the story in the movie, Romeo really needed to have gone full in at that point, like really embraced the culture. Yeah. Because of his own grief.
Well, but again, then seeing him kill Paris, who is a complete innocent. Yeah. So I guess taking the hostage was that version of killing Paris, I suppose.
Right.
Oh, Romeo.
Right. But what really stood out for me was that after their night, in the morning when Romeo wakes up, he wakes up to a nightmare about Tybalt.
Yes.
And
I liked that very much.
Right? Because that really solidified for me that this was it. Like, this is the moment. This is Romeo's fault. This is what makes him a tragic hero. And he takes Juliet along with him, is that he lost his ability to be himself, basically, when he went for revenge. I mean, he always had a gun because everyone had a gun. Right. But he never played with them. He never, he just hadn't been part of that culture until he was. And that the fact that he woke up from in his marriage bed to that nightmare really stuck out for me. In this watch in particular, and maybe again because of where my head is about guns and gun culture right now. But it really struck me that honestly, that was the moment. That was the moment that so it's like Romeo said when he took the drugs, like he had foreboding about what this night was going to bring him. And that's true. When they got married, like I still, every time I see this, I manage to get hopeful for them. Like I really,
Oh, honey.
I know. It's so sad. I'm
You're
so
adorable.
I just, yeah, this is how I experience, this is how I experience stories, is that I just, wherever they want me to go emotionally, I am there. I am so there.
Wow.
But that's the moment there's no chance.
Yeah.
And that it was his doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that instead of choosing, they were the outliers. They were the people who were rejecting the culture and recognized that in each other, I feel like. And that was part of why they fell in love.
Yeah, definitely so.
That they were these quiet souls. They were poetic souls. They were the souls who would think about things and not just show other people what they think other people want to see.
Mm-hmm. Juliet, too, though, I think loses some sense of herself when she shows up in Father Lawrence's cell with the gun to her head.
You're right. That's her moment where she embraces it. That's true.
Yeah. She reaches that point, too.
Wow. You're right. You're so right. Huh. That is really, really interesting. I have to think about that for a minute. No, because I want to go back, like we had talked about in Strictly Ballroom, about how these two, and again, that is a romance, right. Unlike Romeo and Juliet, not a tragedy. Mm-hmm. But we had talked about how our two characters inspired each other and brought each other to better places than they would have reached by themselves. And also that the act of loving, in a way, not only made them better as a couple, but like made them better as individuals. That the larger society was all pretending to be a society, but was all in it for themselves. But these two people were actually in it for each other, and that's what gave them the freedom to have their own individualism. What does that say about this couple?
I mean, this couple, I think they make each other weaker and worse, right?
Didn't they had to not have enough time together because the culture was drawing them apart?
Oh
no,
I don't know. It's possible, but I remember what they're doing is they're leaning into that same hot-blooded. My emotions are the most important thing, whether that's anger or rage or vendetta or love. These are not truly peaceful people in that sense. Like Romeo especially.
I'm not sure I agree with you on Juliet. I mean, it's
hard to say with Juliet because we don't get as much of her. She fights with her nurse. She fights with her mother. She fights with her father.
Yeah, I guess the moment that is so striking to me. I mean, of course, we can't separate them from the time, like when, in the balcony scene or balcony/pool scene, when in the movie, she is basically like, okay, wait, stop, Paul, like, we're not doing this right now.
Right.
What satisfaction can you have tonight? I love that line. That feels like such a modern line. Like, I love lines like that totally work both ways. But in addition to that, she does recognize, like, he's all in, like, and she does recognize, she's like, this is, and I don't think it's just like her protecting her virtue. Like I feel like some part of her essential self is saying, this is too rash.
Yeah, no, that's what she says, because she says something about how she loves him, she trusts him, but she has no faith in this contract tonight. Right. It's too rash and too sudden and too like the lightning. Yeah.
Right. And when he tries to, I love that when he tries to swear on the moon, and she's just like,
not by the moon.
Right.
Absolutely not. Mm-hmm.
Right. And for me, that was just like, I felt like that was her saying, okay, cut out the bullshit. Like, stop with the Romeo act.
I know, but then she does it herself, because then she loses it a little bit and says, or if thou wilt not, swear by thy gracious self, which is the God of my idolatry, and I'll believe thee.
You're right.
And those are not the words of a wise woman. Those are the words of a teenage girl who's super in love.
That's totally, totally true. That's totally true. Well, again, back to what I said in the very beginning, is that I do see a connection between the rashness in the personality, like in the age personality of a teenager, and also a force that could actually, I think it came so close. Like, they could have, if this had worked out, they could have.
If this had worked out, then what? Finish. Go down that road. If they just said,
And
"Mom, Dad, we got
being,
married,"
I'm just being like the friar, where I'm just like, but they can show everyone that it's okay, and everyone would like
just
okay.
throw a big party, and they'd all shake hands, and Tybalt and Mercutio would start dating.
Oh my God!
Sure.
Oh no, you did not just say that. Now I want that. Oh shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Prince of Cats.
Oh my God! I want Tybalt and Mercutio to date. That really, really, really works for me.
Yep.
I'm just gonna
The
sit.
Daphne aesthetic, right there.
I'm gonna just sit in that moment of joy for 1 second before I'm amused with myself, because I was the one who said that I was happy that they didn't even have the rapprochement that you have in the play at the end of the movie. So I'm amused with myself for being the one who says then,
yeah,
could this work?
Yes,
I
That's
know.
so funny.
I know.
Well, and you know what's too bad about that is that the iconography of this movie was so gorgeous, and I was so ready to see the statues of Romeo in his knight costume,
Sure,
and Juliet in her angel costume. How gorgeous would that have been there on the beach at Verona?
Yep. Yes, I agree. Like in front of that stage.
Or on that stage, even.
Right.
Like the whole thing becomes a monument.
But they couldn't be on the stage because the stage represents toxic masculinity.
I'm just thinking about pretty things right now, Daphne.
I understand. But actually, I did want to talk about the costumes because I found it really interesting. The choice of costumes.
Uh-huh.
I mean, yeah, I still feel like we haven't talked enough about Mercutio, but let's just take a moment for me to just say that Mercutio in that outfit with that wig dancing on the top of those stairs. Yeah. That is my aesthetic.
Yep. No, I know.
Had Devil Tybalt, or even better, Tybalt from the opening with his mariachi outfit.
Is he wearing a corset right then? He has to be, right?
It's a vest.
He's
I don't think it's a
pulled in
corset.
so tight. No, I mean beneath the vest.
Oh,
it's possible that John Leguizamo was just shaped like that, but I feel like they cinched him.
I don't know.
Okay.
I think that was just young John Leguizamo. I know. Yes. The aesthetic of John Leguizamo.
That's totally your type. That's hysterical.
And those heels. I love the looks.
Yeah.
I was gifting all week. Like I was trying to get people to love Tybalt as much as I do. Where I was like, where he like kneels down on the ground and like kisses the gun, and I'm just like, I love him so much.
I mean, yeah, I remember that part.
Right. I'm not supposed to love that because that's exactly the toxic masculinity. And yet
it's so good though. And that shirt he's wearing, oh my God.
Yes.
It's so good.
Yes.
Yeah,
and when he opens the jacket and he's like, let me show you your death. And it's like, he's got his two guns and
oh God.
Oh right.
Yeah.
It's we're totally veering into Blackbeard territory. Maybe I just have a thing for guys who have multiple guns strapped to their chests. I don't know. Never thought that was part of my aesthetic.
Who knows?
I am that person who will love Mercutio in a sequin dress and a wig, and also a guy with guns strapped to his body.
Yep. No, I love that about you. A very multifaceted woman.
Where was I going? I was going somewhere with that before I got distracted by you and those two. That's it. I've lost it. You have now destroyed me. Elizabeth Stevens, you have figured out what would make me speechless. My brain is just filled with Mercutio and Tybalt.
I'm so proud.
Oh, the costumes.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So yes, the drag was fantastic.
Absolutely.
Love. Okay. But I also
that see-through white, gauzy white shirt that he has open with the black pants for the death scene is fantastic. Mercutio always looks so sharp.
Now you're just trying to make me speechless. Yes, I love him a lot.
Yeah.
And not
pretty
just
lovable.
because I think he's neat. So the costumes.
Right. God, we're not even drinking today. What is wrong with us?
I know, it's the middle of the day.
It's the middle of the day.
This is what Mercutio and Tybalt do to me. So the costumes, I thought it was really interesting that the Montague boys and Tybalt had horns. They were Vikings. He was the devil.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone has sequins except for Romeo and Juliet of our main characters. Like that's
that's fun,
right? So for that, again, for me, that just highlighted again, like that they
The
are
noise and the quiet.
I guess I won't call them, right, the noise and the quiet, and I guess I won't call them completely outside of the culture, but had the potential. Maybe I need to change my wording, and maybe that's really significant, that they had the potential.
I mean, I would say that they were a more mellowed version of it. Like, they weren't as consumed by it as everybody else was at all. But I just don't think that they were completely without it.
Which is more
either.
appropriate, right? They weren't outside. They had tendencies that led them towards quiet, but
Yes.
ultimately the culture of violence was so great that they succumbed.
Yes.
And that's what the
Yeah.
story's saying. I wanted them to I wanted to hold on to the potential of them being different and seeing a road to reform, but they didn't. Like, the message is they succumbed to the culture of violence, and that was their downfall.
That was the message, and it was the downfall. Yep, you're absolutely right.
I mean, again, they wouldn't have had an easy road to anyway. Like, to, I don't want to blame them for their downfall, because they were fighting against such odds, because so much violence and so much hatred and so much, again, like, I feel like all of the youth here, the extent of the performance of what they're doing and the stage and being on the stage is watching them performing their way into becoming the adults.
yeah.
They're living, they're living up to the expectations of their culture. And again, super, super poignant for our culture, especially right now. I mean, I'm still going to hold on hope. I'm holding on hope to our teenagers of our time.
Please do. Yes, please do.
Well, I said I was going to get dark and be a downer, didn't I?
No, that's okay. You're good. So let's talk about the insane beauty of that final scene, where we have Romeo and Juliet in the, like in the play, it's the crypt. Here it's in the chapel.
I think it's the chapel.
I'll call it a chapel. That makes sense.
I mean, is it the same chapel as where they married?
I believe it is.
Okay, I believe
it's
so
that
too.
same church. Yeah, I think that it is. And it's beautiful. All the candles and the neon lights, the neon crosses.
I love the neon crosses.
Oh, it's such a gorgeous scene. It's preposterously beautiful. And then with their death, we get, of course, those flashbacks to the aquarium. We get them underwater together again, and it freezes. And then it's interesting that we've been talking this whole time about the two of them being the quiet among the noise, because there's no music once the title scenes play, which is, or the ending credits rather roll, which is very interesting and unusual.
You're totally right. Yeah, I feel like we need to talk about just how good that scene is too.
It's so good.
They're
both incredible. And I think the adaptive choice to have him wake up and know what is happening before he dies is so much more powerful.
Well, to have her wake up, like to have, and him, like, then him see her while he's dying. That was so good. I know. It's just
gorgeous. Yeah.
And I just feel like, again, in the play, that is one of the messages, that life is fragile.
Yes. That's a good point. Yeah.
That life is fragile. Again, there's so much talk of death throughout the whole play. And it's like, I mean, again, it goes back to what we just said. It's like, how could they have ever succeeded?
Right.
That in this violent world, in this world that isn't just violent, but just like so glorifies violence. How can love actually succeed there?
Right. Yeah. How can love and peace,
right,
thrive at all there? We get the opening monologue that Father Lawrence has when he talks about there's both this scent and like the lovely fragrance of this flower,
right,
and the poison both abide. It's like, and the same humors are in man.
Yep.
Like you have beauty and you have evil, and one of them is going to win out in your life.
Right. Well, and then when he marries them, what is that very famous, that very, very, very famous quote? These violent delights bring violent ends. Oh God, I should be able to quote that at least. I'm so bad.
Yeah. Well, and wisely and slow, they stumble that run fast. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes. No, he has a lot of that he of anyone in this
balance.
play is the
balance,
moderating force
right.
and the balance.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, which is, again, what he's actively trying to do. I mean, that's
Yes.
also interesting, like how he is kind of using them in the
Oh,
same way
yeah.
that I had, in my moment of optimism, had been
Yes.
wanting to
well,
use them.
in that wise, like, oh, you are these young, hopeful children, and the love that you have and the peace that you bring will just change everything. It's very naive. And it's also not, it's non-specific. It is not specific to Romeo
Right.
and to Juliet. It's the same as when he's looking at his flowers and
Right.
he's spinning out this lovely poetry. That's great. But this is about your philosophy. This isn't actually about
Right.
these two kids and these two families.
Yeah, and it's extremely irresponsible. I mean, he's using
Yes.
these children.
And he recognizes it in the play. We don't get this in the movie,
Right,
but in
we
the
don't.
play, he sees I've made a mistake, and he's pleading with Juliet, run away with me, and no one will ever know. No one
Right.
will ever know that this happened. And she
Right.
refuses to, but he flees the scene as a
Yeah.
complete coward. He leaves her to fix, which of course, and she chooses to
She's
fix
like,
it by ending her life.
I'm going to fix it the way my culture told me to fix stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. But he absolutely fails both of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, adults do. I mean, that's again to
Yeah.
this whole thing about teenagers and adults. It's just like, if there's any message you get from this story, it's that adults fail their children in every way because they lose, and then and the children pay the price for that.
Yes.
And that really, really is such a striking message.
All are punished.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All are punished.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I feel like that's the hashtag for all the school shootings.
Right.
All
That's
are
what I'm
punished.
saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
No.
It's like
Shit.
and that's what these kids who are becoming activists right now are basically saying is that this isn't just a philosophical conversation for us. We are the ones being killed.
Yes.
And you all haven't protected us.
Yeah. Ooh.
Right?
Wow. Yes.
That's why I'm saying it just gave me chills when I started reading it again, where I was just like,
Very
whoa,
powerful.
this play is about this moment in our history in the U.S.
As only great art can do. God,
As
that's
only
incredible.
great art can do. Right.
Wow.
Hundreds of years later, which is the saddest part of it all. Like the real tragedy is hundreds of years later, this play is relevant still.
Yes. Humans are still humans. Go
Right.
figure.
I know, but it would be really nice if we were like, oh, this is this artifact of this time hundreds of years
Sure.
ago, and we don't live like that anymore.
Right. We're enlightened beings now.
Right. I would have liked for that to be the conversation we had.
Sure.
That would have been really nice. All right. On that note, let's move on to favorite things.
Oh, of course. Sure. Ooh.
I know.
All right.
I know. I think I'm going to pick mine just because it's something that I haven't brought up yet, but that is one of my
Oh, okay.
favorite things. Because, I mean, you just created my favorite thing, not to go back down that road.
Yes.
Tell me your favorite thing first.
Oh, for me, I think, I think it's the beauty of that meeting of the lovers with the Desiree song that's happening. God, it's so gorgeous. It's such a haunting, I don't know, but also that final death scene with all the candles is gorgeous too.
You can pick
But
that.
it is those two still
Yeah.
and quiet moments, like the most romantic moments
Right.
of the film, I think, are just so beautiful, like unnecessarily beautiful.
The meeting, like the whole thing with hands and lips and prayers is actually, that's my favorite part of the play. Like that's my favorite. It's my favorite bit of language. Like I just love the play. I mean, the whole play is amazing plays on language because, Shakespeare. But but a lot of that is used towards really body stuff, which is fun, right? There's just it would be like 5 podcasts just to go through every time like something is said amongst the men that could have been sexual innuendo.
That's
We
a
didn't
sex
get
joke. Yeah.
right. We didn't get into that too. Like that, I found it was really interesting in making Mercutio possibly be gay because that the bit between him and Tybalt, where Tybalt says, "Do you consort with Romeo?" Like that took on a whole different meaning.
Oh, Of course.
Right? And when he says
Yeah.
and the performance, his performance where he says have a
Well, then we
word
got some
and
minstrels.
and when he says right, and when he says how about a word and a blow, he totally made that be like it could be a blowjob. Which I don't.
Wow.
Yeah, he totally like. There are moments.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
didn't bring up all. There's a few moments in this play where in the movie where the performance choices, because it is in the mid-90s, had really fun twists.
Yes.
And for me, that was one of them because I don't know if blow had that meaning back then.
I
in
don't know
Shakespeare.
either. Doesn't matter. Works now.
Right, totally works now, and I
Yep.
loved that, especially with the way the interaction between Mercutio and Romeo. It added a layer to that conversation with Tybalt, because Tybalt seems to me, I mean, as much as now I ship them, Tybalt seems to me like someone who would have reacted badly if someone was suggesting that they have sex,
yeah.
right?
Certainly so.
So I just found that just that little interaction was so interesting because of the sexuality question that they added in the movie, or at least the way I see the movie.
Absolutely.
But the wordplay with the palms and the lips and the prayers and the saints, like that's so delightful for me. I'm still not choosing that as my favorite thing. I just had to say that because you chose it as one of your favorite things.
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
I think I'm going to choose, basically Mercutio is my favorite thing, but I'm going to choose something else because we didn't talk about this, and it is what kind of sold me intellectually on the movie was the way that Baz Luhrmann kept the language and modernized it. Like that he situated, like that we start with the news, watching the news on a television. Yeah. That the guns are all swords. Mm-hmm. That just all of these wonderful ways that he didn't change language, because he could have changed language. But I think this is just also like within the realm of my personal aesthetic. I love when people mix modernity and antiquity in that way, where it's like you're kind of like you're just experiencing the story, but on an intellectual level, I'm like, that's so cool that they managed to do that and make it work. Yes. So, oh, right. And the post haste. I love the post haste. Oh, that's like killed me. The post haste, I think, because that's much later in the movie. I think the first time where it really registered for me, the first time I saw it was the guns, where I saw that they say sword on them. I was like, I am in love. This is brilliant. And the post haste was like the cherry on top. Whereas, I love that you made the delivery service post haste.
Did you notice? I can't believe that I didn't mention this. The Coca-Cola logo that was not Coca-Cola, that we got the big Coca-Cola sign just like from... Oh, you didn't see this?
No!
It said, oh my God. No, it wasn't Coca-Cola because...
Right.
It said L'Amour, but it was a Coca-Cola sign. Like, you know how marketing and branding works.
Oh my God.
I'll find it. Yeah. No. It's like, it's just in the streets. It's huge. It's a massive billboard.
Wait, so do we think there's one in Moulin Rouge also?
I don't know. We'll have to look for it. That would be much harder to do, but I wouldn't put it past them.
No, I would not put it past them either.
I would not put it past them. I'm going to look for it. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Okay, I have to go watch it again. I love that.
Yeah, you got to find it. I'll see if I can find it for you.
Which is funny because I actually made a note about signs. I mean, he definitely is using all sorts of commercial things for messages. Like in the opening scene, I love that, you see, they really focus in on it. You see the sign swinging. The sign swinging when they're in that gas station says, add fuel to your fire.
Oh, yes.
Which for me was really about this, like this escalation that's going on and this masculinity and this performativeness, like add fuel to your fire. And then, of course, it all ends with utter destruction and fire and explosions. And and the thing that we hadn't really talked about, which I also love in the play, I didn't remember this was in the play, like after that first fight, like the people of Verona are like rebelling against the two families. Like the people are like, fuck you all. Look what you're doing. Like you are endangering all of us. And the opening scene did a really good job, I felt like, of, when you have the nun with the children and the ladies in the car and the kid who says bang. Like the opening scene really gave a good sense of how much this feud is endangering a whole city.
Yes. And I love the prince as chief of police.
Right? It's so great. It's so brilliant.
So brilliant. Works perfectly.
Right.
So many smart choices.
I know. Okay, I have to see that Coca-Cola thing. I love that. There is no way that's not in Moulin Rouge.
We'll find it.
Yeah,
it'll be there somehow.
Right, because like the only labeling I can always think of with Moulin Rouge is with the absinthe and the fairy. Which again, fairies.
Oh,
wait, do we have a fairy? No, we don't have a fairy reference in Strictly Ballroom, right?
no.
Okay,
Not that I'm aware of. Mm-mm.
okay. With absinthe, we do with the fairy, and again, intoxication and fairy.
Intoxication and drugs and fairy, yeah, is interesting, but I don't think that we get that either in Strictly Ballroom.
Oh no, Fran's family, they're all drinking, but yeah, no, yeah, absinthe. Sorry. Yeah, maybe we could say that Baz Luhrmann's in this triptych, the films just get increasingly intoxicated.
Definitely so. Definitely so.
I love it. All right, everyone. So your homework for 2 weeks from now is to watch Moulin Rouge, Rough Life, which I've now figured out is on Stars, as is this.
Perfect.
Right? So
that's great.
We're just continuing our tradition of reminding people that
Stars
they should
love.
Right. You should keep your Stars subscriptions.
Yes.
And also watch Black Sails.
Uh-huh.
Wouldn't be an episode if I didn't tell people to watch Black Sails. So 2 weeks from now we'll do that, and then we are still deciding what we're going to do after Moulin Rouge, but we will tell you 2 weeks from now what our plans are.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
Until next time, from Common Room Radio, I'm Elizabeth Stevens.
And I'm Daphne Olive.
This wind you talk of blows us from ourselves, supper is done, and we shall come too late.
I fear too early, for my mind misgives some consequence yet hanging in the stars. Shall bitterly begin his fearful date with this night's revels and expire the term of a despised life closed within my breast by some vile forfeit of untimely death. But he that hath the steerage of my course, direct my sail.
Can I Just Say podcast is a Common Room Radio production. For more information and our other shows, visit commonroomradio.com. To show your support, pledges of as little as $1 a month can make a big difference. Visit patreon.com/commonroomradio to pledge support and access bonus features that are just for patrons. And join the conversation by using the hashtag #CanIJustSay and follow us on Twitter @JustSayPodcast. We request that you keep your tweets respectful and positive, and you can always email us at podcast@commonroomradio.com. Thanks for listening.